Today we're taking these beautiful cotton blue colours and turning them into some gorgeous towels. Let's get started. Hi everyone, it's Steph and welcome to another video. So this project took a little longer than normal because I may have made a mistake, but I will be fully transparent and share this with you in the video. This is my original design for the project. I initially called it flower dots because the darker dots could be the centre of a flower, and I just liked the blue colours. So this is the original design, and you can see for the warp it's just 3 threads of a lighter blue followed by 1 thread of a darker blue. I decided to add a darker blue also into the weft, and you can see that the weft is 3 picks of the lighter green cetin colour and then 1 pick of the darker blue. And as always, I like to give you some colour choices if you wanted to make this for yourself, but in different colours. The colours I'm using today are navy, cetin and jeans. So that's the first, the second and the fourth colours. The third one I've got in there just in case I run out of the navy because I just wasn't sure if I was going to have enough. So I've got the marine in there just as a little bit of a backup, and I didn't end up using the marine at all. So I'll be using my 60cm rigid Heddle loom, that's a 24-inch, and a 10 dent reed. I'll be using some loom clips, my threading hook, some retractable measuring tape, some curved and sharp scissors, a couple of shuttles, a pickup stick to help the shed at the end of the weaving, some flexible measuring tape as well. So now we're ready to go. Let's get started. The first thing I do is clamp my loom to one end of my dining table. My coat rack for pegs is already clamped to the other side. Once that's done, I just tidy up any of the leftover threads from the previous project. This is where those sharp curved end scissors come in handy, just to really easily cut those little bits off. Then I'm going to attach my reed. This is a 10 dent reed, and then I will attach the reed to the front apron rod. Then I like to wind back just a little bit just to keep everything nice and stable. The weaving width for this project is 55 centimeters, which is around 22 inches. I think it's just shy of 22 inches. So here I'm just sharing my chicken scratchings on how I worked out the warping sequence, and it is totally wrong. But I've worked out that it's warping through 2 slots of the lighter blue followed by 1 slot of the darker blue across the warp. Wrong. But if you're an experienced weaver, you'll probably immediately see what I've done wrong. But I don't want to spoil things for you, but I will show you how I fix it later on in the threading stage and also what I did wrong. So I've just gone ahead and warped up 2 light blue and 1 dark blue across the whole of the warp. So the length of warp for this project is 1.9 meters or 76 inches. And the warping sequence is 2 slots of jeans followed by 1 slot of navy. And we'll be weaving 2 towels of 80 centimeters each or 31.5 inches. I chose just to carry the yarns across, so I didn't tie one colour off before I went to the next one, which worked out fine. Warping didn't take very long at all, and it wasn't long before we were done and ready to wind on. Once I'd finished warping, I then tied off my colours and unhooked my heddle from the apron rod. Then I unclamped my loom from the table and then wound on just a little bit so I could slot my brown paper, which is what I use as a warp separator, in nice and neatly, and then I can wind on. When you're winding on towards the pegs, just pull backwards a little bit, and that will help to keep the tension nice and even as you're winding on. I then got the loom secured onto the loom stand and got myself all set up. I tied off the warp in little bundles, which just saves your warp if you happen to bump the heddle and lose all of your threading. Then I started on the first bunch and snipped all the loops down the bottom. I then started threading. I'm not going to share the threading because it was wrong, but I started on the process here. I also, once I'd had a look and was happy with how it was looking, I then tied off in bundles of 8 threads, and that's 4 slots and 4 holes, tied a knot down the bottom so that it was all ready to tie on. So it's about here when I start to realise that things were wrong. And what made me realise that is that I had all of these leftover navy threads sitting on top of the heddle when it should have been a 16 thread block where all threads are used. So I'm trying to work it out. I'm trying to work out the blocks. I'm trying to work out why the threading looks fine, but I've got all of these leftover navy threads. I admit I walked away from the loom for a while, and by a while I mean a couple of days, because I was really frustrated. And then it just came to me that if the threading looked correct, then I must have made a mistake with the warp sequence. And this is why I also tie up my warp, because I seem to do this so often lately, just bump the heddle. So here is my original chicken scratchings to work out the warp sequence. And it didn't take long for me to realise that I'd actually done 1, 2, 3, 3 being the navy. So I've done 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and I haven't done another navy on the other end, which means it's not a 16 thread block at all. So I reworked it down the bottom, and this, for this pattern, if you wanted to do the original pattern, use this warping sequence of 3 slots of the jeans, 1 slot of the navy, and then you'll be fine. But I went back to I Weave It so I could work out how to fix it without redoing the warp, because that would have been a waste of yarn. So I've gone back into my I Weave It. I worked out that it actually doesn't look too bad by just putting those extra 2 navy threads at the end of the 16 block sequence. So it just makes an 18 thread sequence instead of a 16. So that's what I did. I did have to go back and undo everything. I tried so hard to undo these knots, but somehow I've got super strength because I could not even undo it with scissors. And I was still really frustrated. So I ended up just cutting the knots off and then the rethreading and redoing the warp sequence. So this will make my warp a couple of inches shorter, which means I'll just be weaving a lot closer to the apron rod at the end. So now I can relax and just thread up, and this is what it looks like, still very, very pretty. Then I just tie off in groups of 8 as I'm threading, ready for tying on. To tie on, I use some scrap yarn that's around 4 to 5 widths of the loom. I wind half up into a yarn butterfly just to make it a little bit easier to work with, and I can undo it when I get to the stage of the yarn butterfly. Then I grab each group of 8 threads, divide in half, drop the yarn through the top, then around the bottom of the apron rod, and then I could just continue that across all of the groups of threads. I also like to tighten up a little bit as I go, and that just makes the tension a little bit easier to control when you get to the end, and then you're trying to make sure that all of that tension is nice and even. Once that's all done, and before tying off the other end of the scrap yarn, just strum the warp at the back of the heddle, just so you can pick up any areas that might be slacker than others, so that you've got a chance to tidy that up before you tie that other end of the scrap yarn on. So now we are ready to spread the warp. I use scrap yarn and wind about 7 lengths onto a shuttle. I then do 3 picks without beating, so heddle up, heddle down, heddle up, then beat those 3 picks down quite firmly to where the knots are. And then I like to make sure that that's a nice straight line down the bottom. This can loosen up the threads also, so wind on just a little bit and then repeat. So another 3 picks without beating, beat the next 3 picks down to a nice straight line, and that's all you need to do to spread your warp. Here you can see I've got hardly anything left of the jeans colour, so it was just the perfect amount that was left on that cone for the warp. I'll be using the navy and the Seton green colour only in the weft. So I want 2 shuttles, one with the Seton green and the other one with the navy, and I'm ready to start weaving. The weft sequence for the first towel is super easy. It's 3 picks of the Seton green colour followed by 1 pick of the navy. Super simple but lovely and effective. As always, the weaving part is my happy place. I think it's something to do with the repetitive nature of throwing picks and beating, throwing picks and beating, that's so meditative and relaxing for me. After I've woven for a little bit, I wind on so that I can attach the cardboard tube which covers the knots. I don't use any separator for the finished weaving, but I do like to cover the knots so that the knots don't poke through that fresh weaving and push those threads out of place. I'll also attach my flexible measuring tape just with a quilting clip on the side, and this helps to know when the first towel ends, and I can pop a couple of lines of scrap yarn in and then start the second towel. I'm just loving how this pattern looks. It looks amazing. It just goes to show that sometimes when you make a mistake, you can actually find out something new or different, or create something that you didn't intend but is still really beautiful and even unexpected. Now that I've hit 80 centimeters for the first towel, I'm popping in a couple of picks of scrap yarn and then starting the second towel. For the second towel, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to do the base color of the Seton green, but just putting one strip of the same pattern from the first towel in, and that way it's like a coordinating set but not a matching set. And sometimes they look really nice with just a bar down the bottom, especially when the towels are hung over the oven door. It's a really effective method also just to get two towels that are a little different but still coordinating. I'm now at the messy end of the warp, so I've popped the heddle in the up position and I'm popping my pickup stick behind the heddle and then pushing it up towards the apron rod. I'm going to have to weave a little bit closer to the apron rod than I normally like to do because I've had to cut those knots off at the start. However, putting the pickup stick behind the heddle will neaten up the sheds and just make it a lot easier to weave those last few inches of that towel. I'm not sure if you can see here, my apron rod is bowing, and the reason is one of my plastic ties, actually two of the plastic ties have actually broken, and that's bowing the apron rod. So now I'm going to have to ensure that I get some more plastic ties. I think I might even think about upgrading to Texile cords. So it's something that I've been thinking about for a while. But that might be brought up the line, I think, but we'll see how we go. Now that I've finished the second towel, I've just popped a couple of picks of scrap yarn in, removed the weaving from the loom, and this is what it's looking like. Absolutely stunning. To wet finish the towels, I've put them straight into the washing machine on the delicate cycle with a little bit of dish soap just to get rid of any machine oils from the manufacturing of the yarn. Then straight into the dryer so that they're pre-shrunk and ready to sew. You can see here that there is some pretty beautiful tracking, really pretty tracking on both of the towels, so I'm really thrilled with how these have turned out. I'm now giving them a really good iron with lots of steam and also just snipping off all of those tails, ready for separating and sewing. After wet finishing, the length of the towels went from 80 centimetres or 31.5 inches down to 71 centimetres, which is around about 28 inches. So we've lost a fair bit in take up and shrinkage. The width went from 55 centimetres or just under 22 inches down to around about 46 centimetres, which is about 18 inches. To safely separate the towels, I'm going to do a zigzag stitch right up next to the scrap yarn on both the start and the finish of the weaving, and also either side of the scrap yarn that separates the first and second towel. And these zigzagged edges actually just form part of the finished edge that will then be folded up a couple of times to make our hem. To allow the towels to be hung up, I've got these handmade with love fabric strips, which I just fold in half and then pin the top, and I slot them in and then hem them down when I'm doing my straight stitch. To hem the towels, I just fold the ends up twice, pin in place, plus the little handmade with love fabric strip, and then it's just a straight stitch to hem the towels down, and then they're done. Thank you so much for watching my videos. I really do appreciate every single one of you that watch and enjoy my videos. You've given me real purpose in life, so thank you. If you found value from this video, please click the like button. If you haven't already and feel comfortable doing so, please subscribe. Remember, it is free. If you've got a question, leave me a comment, and if you wish to support me monetarily, then super thanks are also available. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you love these towels just as much as I do, and also I hope you all have a wonderful day.